Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. When I think back to my early 20s, I should remember those years as a time of freedom and self-discovery. I was 22 in college, working part-time, trying to build a life for myself without depending on my parents' money. But those memories are overshadowed by one person, my younger sister Emma. She was 18 then, still a teenager, but in our family she was already the reigning queen. Emma was my mom's golden child and I was the afterthought. That's not bitterness speaking, it's just the truth. From the time we were kids, she got away with everything. If I didn't clean my room, I was grounded. If she didn't clean hers, mom would tidy it herself and call her tired from school. If I came home late, I was interrogated. If she did, it was because she lost track of time. My dad, thankfully, always tried to keep things fair. He wasn't blind to her behavior and he often called her out for lying or manipulating. But my mom, she defended Emma no matter what, twisting herself into knots to excuse her behavior. By the time Emma turned 18, she was spoiled, entitled, and convinced the world revolved around her. I thought maybe adulthood would humble her. Instead, it only gave her more opportunities to test boundaries. The incident that broke our family started when my parents decided to take a ski trip to Aspen. It was their little getaway, something they'd been planning for months. They left Emma in charge of the house with one very clear rule: no parties. My dad looked her in the eyes before they left and said, "I mean it. No one comes over, no alcohol, no excuses." She nodded, acting responsible and trustworthy, but I knew my sister. In the second their car pulled out of the driveway, I had a bad feeling. That bad feeling turned into reality faster than I expected. The very next day, Emma started blasting invites on Facebook. A big party at our parents' house, everyone welcome, alcohol guaranteed. She didn't just quietly plan it with a few friends, she announced it like she was hosting the event of the year. I didn't see the post at first, but I got dragged into it anyway. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Emma. Her tone was unusually sweet, which I recognized instantly as her "I want something" voice. She said she needed me to do her a favor. She wanted me to buy alcohol for her party since I was over 21. And not only buy it but pay for it up front. In exchange, she promised she'd pay me back by inviting me to the party and introducing me to some easy girl. I remember holding the phone away from my ear in disbelief. She wasn't even embarrassed to ask me to break the law for her. I told her flat out no. "Emma, you're insane if you think I'm going to commit a crime just so you can look cool in front of your friends. You shouldn't even be throwing a party. You're underage, they're underage, it's illegal." Her response? She screamed at me, said I was ruining her life, that everyone was already expecting alcohol and she couldn't back out now. She blamed me as if her big mouth posting it online wasn't the real problem. I told her she'd dug her own hole and I wasn't climbing into it with her. Then I hung up. Later, I finally saw her Facebook post. Dozens of people had already commented saying they'd be there. Kids from our high school, friends of friends, people she barely knew. I facepalmed so hard I thought I'd leave a mark. She had just announced to the entire county that underage drinking would be happening at our house. It was beyond stupid, it was suicidal. That night the party happened. Music blasted, cars lined the street, red plastic cups littered the lawn. I wasn't there, but I heard about it in real time through texts from a couple mutual friends. The noise got so bad that one of the neighbors called the police. And when the cops arrived, they didn't just break up the party, they found dozens of minors drinking. And that's when Emma made her move. When the police confronted her, drunk and slurring, she told them I was the one who'd supplied the alcohol. She didn't hesitate, didn't stutter, she just threw me directly under the bus. She said I'd been the one who bought everything, that I was the one responsible. She broke into Dad's locked liquor cabinet, stole his expensive bottles, and when she got caught, she decided to pin it all on me. I didn't know this until the next day when the police showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find two officers waiting, their expressions already hard and unforgiving. Before I could even process what was happening, they told me I was under arrest. They acted like I was guilty from the moment they saw me. I tried to tell them I hadn't even been at the party, that I had nothing to do with it, but they weren't listening. They cuffed me and took me downtown. Sitting in that cold, concrete cell that night was the most surreal experience of my life. I kept thinking, how did I get here? All because my sister couldn't follow a simple rule and because my mom had raised her to believe lies could always get her out of trouble. The next morning, my parents were called back from Aspen in a panic, and that's when the real nightmare began. When the police let me make a phone call from the station, I didn't even hesitate. I called my dad. I knew that if I called my mom first, she would side with Emma immediately. She always did. Dad, though, he listened. Always. He was livid when he picked up, not at me, but at the situation. He demanded to know why his 22-year-old son was calling from jail, and when I told him Emma had thrown me under the bus for supplying alcohol, I could hear his breath catch. "Stay calm," he said, his voice tight with fury. "I'll be on the first flight home." Both he and my mom cut their vacation short and flew home overnight. When they arrived at the station the next morning, they bilayed both Emma and me out, and right there in the lobby, the family war began. My mom's eyes were cold when she looked at me. She didn't even ask how I was. She turned immediately to my dad and hissed, "Leave him here. It's Emma we need to worry about. His future will survive this. Hers won't." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was basically saying I should be sacrificed to protect Emma's reputation. My dad stared at her in shock, then turned to me. "Son, what happened?" So I told him. I explained the phone call Emma had made, how she begged me to buy alcohol, how I said no, how I saw her Facebook post. Dad pulled out his phone and searched Emma's profile right there in the station. Sure enough, her invite was still up, dozens of comments from people excited about the party. His jaw tightened, his knuckles white around the phone. Meanwhile, Emma tried to spin another tale. She swore I'd brought her the alcohol, that I was lying, that she only said it was me because she didn't want to get me in trouble with the police. She babbled nonsense, tripping over her own lies, but Dad wasn't buying it. My mom, however, was. She stood between me and Emma like a shield, snapping at Dad. "She's just a child. Can't you see she's scared? Why would you automatically believe him?" "Because he has proof," my dad growled. "And because he hasn't spent the last 10 years lying every time he opens his mouth." That fight carried all the way home. My dad dug into the facts. He checked his locked liquor cabinet and found it broken into, bottles missing, expensive whiskey gone. He called the police himself and explained that Emma had stolen it, not me. He backed me every step of the way. Mom, though, doubled down. She tried to convince Dad I was guilty. She even came to my apartment later, tears streaming, begging me to take the fall for Emma. She said I could survive a felony charge because you're strong, while Emma was too fragile. She actually dropped to her knees, clutching my hands, whispering that this was the only way to save her baby's future. I remember standing over her, stunned, my body trembling with anger. "You want me to ruin my life," I said, "so she doesn't have to face the consequences of her own actions." She nodded without shame, without hesitation. When I refused, she snapped. She went from begging to raging in an instant, throwing things around my apartment, shouting every curse she could muster. Before storming out, she spat the cruelest words I've ever heard: "I should have aborted you." The silence after she left was deafening. I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't even hold my phone. But then I called Dad. I told him everything. Every word she said, every fit she threw, every time she tried to make me carry Emma's sins. Dad was beyond furious. He told me he was done tolerating my mom's favoritism. When he got home that night, they had a fight that shook the house. My mom didn't even deny it. She actually told him she thought sacrificing me would have been for the greater good. That's when Dad finally put his foot down. He told her it was family counseling or divorce. She had signed a prenup before marrying him, and she knew she had no ground to stand on, so she agreed, reluctantly, bitterly. And that's how we ended up in a counselor's office, all four of us peeling back the rotten layers of our family dynamic. But that came later. Before that, there was still the matter of Emma's lies unraveling, because the more evidence Dad pulled, the weaker her story became. My apartment's CCTV showed my car parked all night. Work's CCTV showed me clocking out and heading straight home. Bank records showed no alcohol purchases. And the house's door camera, my car was never in the driveway. Emma's story changed with every new piece of proof. First, I'd bought it. Then I'd already had it at home. Then she came to get it from me, but CCTV never caught her car at my place either. She was cornered, drowning in her own contradictions. And still, my mom begged me to just say I did it anyway. That's when I realized something chilling. To my mom, truth didn't matter, justice didn't matter. Her golden child mattered, and I never would. Family counseling was not something I ever imagined we'd do. If you'd asked me at 22, I would have said therapy was for other families, families that were broken in obvious ways, families with parents who didn't care. Mine cared. At least my dad did. My mom cared too, but her version of caring was so warped that it almost destroyed me. Dad was the one who forced it. After my mom demanded I take the fall for Emma after she threw a tantrum in my apartment and told me she wished she'd aborted me, he'd had enough. He told her flat out, counseling or divorce, no more excuses, no more golden child protection. So there we were, me, Dad, Emma, and my mom, sitting in an uncomfortable waiting room with pastel walls and fake plants. Emma scrolled on her phone like she wasn't the reason we were there. Mom sat stiffly, her arms folded, glaring at me as if I'd dragged her into this. Dad looked like a man holding back a storm. The counselor was a calm, middle-aged woman who didn't flinch easily. She welcomed us in, asked why we were there, and Dad laid it all out. Emma had thrown a party, lied to the police, tried to frame me, and Mom had enabled her every step of the way. I'll never forget the way the counselor looked at Emma after hearing that. She asked her directly, "Is that true?" And Emma, without hesitation, shook her head. "No, none of that is true, he's lying." It was like déjà vu, the same pattern I'd seen my whole life. Lie, deny, spin the story, and I could see Mom already nodding along, ready to defend her. But this time I was prepared. I pulled a notebook from my bag and laid it flat on the counselor's desk. "I knew this would happen," I said, my voice shaking but steady, so I made a list. On that list were every single lie Emma had told over the years that had been proven false. Every manipulation, every time she'd blamed me or someone else for her own mistakes. I had dates, examples, outcomes. It was meticulous because I knew without evidence my word meant nothing to my mom. As I read them aloud, one by one, the room grew colder. The time Emma blamed me for breaking a neighbor's window with a baseball, only for the neighbor to catch her on camera. The time she told Mom I stole $20 from her wallet, only for Dad to find the bill in Emma's backpack. The time she claimed I'd skipped class and gotten detention, but the school called to confirm it was her. The dozens of times she'd played the victim, and I'd been punished until the truth finally came out. Each entry hit like a hammer, and every time Mom tried to interject, "That's not how it happened," or "You're remembering wrong," the counselor silenced her. Emma at first tried to argue, she interrupted, tried to change the subject, rolled her eyes, but as the list went on, her mask cracked. By the 10th example, she shut down completely, staring at the floor, her arms wrapped tight around herself. And Mom, she sat there, her face twisted in discomfort, looking like someone forced to watch a movie she hated. When the counselor turned to her and asked, "Do you see the pattern here?" Mom stammered, opened her mouth, closed it, and finally whispered, I was just trying to protect her." "By sacrificing your other child?" the counselor asked softly. Mom didn't answer, she just cried silently, her hands clenched in her lap. At the end of the session, the counselor asked each of us to apologize to one another. Dad apologized for letting things get this far. I apologized for letting resentment build up over the years instead of speaking sooner. Emma refused. She crossed her arms, muttered that she didn't do anything wrong, and stared at the wall. And my mom, she gave me the most forced apology I've ever heard in my life. She wouldn't even look me in the eyes when she said it. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, her voice flat, like a kid being told to apologize for stealing candy. I looked at her for a long moment and said, "That apology is fake, and after all these years, after everything, it doesn't matter anymore." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the counselor seemed at a loss for words. That day, something inside me shifted. I stopped hoping my mom would ever see me the way she saw Emma. I stopped waiting for her approval, and I realized that as long as Emma stayed in our lives, this cycle would never end. But what none of us knew then was that Emma's lies were about to face the one thing she couldn't twist: the courtroom. If counseling cracked the mask Emma had worn her whole life, the courtroom shattered it. Unlike family therapy or screaming matches in the kitchen, court wasn't a place where charm, tears, or favoritism could carry her. It was a place of records, facts, sworn testimony, and people who weren't impressed by crocodile tears. The weeks leading up to the trial were chaos. My mom was relentless. She begged, demanded, manipulated, and even tried bribing me with promises of future inheritance if I would just say the alcohol was yours. She repeated the same poisonous line over and over. "Emma's future is on the line, you'll recover, she won't." It was as if she had rehearsed it, convinced it was some unshakable truth. Every time I told her no, and every time she grew angrier, Dad finally banned her from even bringing the subject up. He warned her, "If you try to pressure him again, we're done, I mean it." But I knew she didn't stop believing it. Deep down, she still thought I was expendable compared to Emma. When the trial began, Emma walked into the courtroom with her head high, as though this was some minor inconvenience she'd swat away with a pout and a few excuses. She wore a dress my mom had picked out for her, conservative but polished like a schoolgirl trying to look mature. My mom sat behind her, dabbing at her eyes with tissues, whispering encouragement every time Emma looked back. Dad sat next to me. He wasn't crying, he wasn't wringing his hands. He was furious, his jaw set, his fists clenched on the bench. He was there for me, and he wanted the judge to see the truth. The charges against Emma were serious: providing alcohol to minors, resisting arrest, and lying to police by falsely accusing me. The fact that multiple teenagers had been caught drinking and some had even attempted to drive home drunk made the police eager to push the case forward. Worse still, a few of those kids were the children of local officers. The entire department wanted someone's head for this mess. Emma, of course, was more than willing to offer mine. At first, her lawyer tried to stick to her story, that I'd supplied the alcohol, but Dad had already gone to war behind the scenes. He hired his own attorney not to defend Emma but to make sure the truth about me came out. He subpoenaed CCTV footage from my job, my apartment building, and even liquor stores across the county. He provided bank statements, phone records, and door camera footage. All of it painted one clear picture: I hadn't left my apartment that night. When the evidence was presented, Emma's story collapsed. The prosecutor tore into her on the stand. If your brother bought the alcohol, why was his car never seen leaving his apartment? Why were his bank records clean? Why is there footage of you breaking into your father's locked liquor cabinet? Emma tried to pivot. She claimed she'd misremembered. Then she claimed I'd given it to her earlier. Then she tried to say she wasn't sure anymore. Each shift in her story dug the hole deeper. And my mom embarrassed herself that day. She stood and begged the judge for leniency. She wept about Emma's bright future, about how one mistake shouldn't ruin her life. She painted Emma as a victim of stress, peer pressure, anything except her own choices. She even went so far as to say, my son can take the hit. He's strong, she's not. The courtroom went silent when she said that. The judge raised his eyebrows, the prosecutor blinked, and I swear I saw Dad's soul leave his body for a moment. He turned and stared at my mom with a look so cold it could have frozen fire. After that, the judge didn't indulge her again. In the end, Emma's lawyer cut a deal to keep her out of jail. She pled guilty, paid massive fines, and was slapped with probation. She was ordered to attend therapy as part of the agreement. She hated every second of it. The only reason she accepted was because her lawyer told her flat out, if she went to trial, she'd almost certainly end up with a felony on her record. My parents paid nearly everything: the lawyer, the fines, the fees. Emma chipped in barely a fraction, and she showed no gratitude, not to Dad, not to Mom, not to anyone. Walking out of that courtroom, I thought maybe, just maybe, the truth would change something. That Mom would finally see her golden child for who she was, that Emma would feel even a flicker of remorse. But no, Emma glared at me with pure venom, like I was the one who had ruined her life. And Mom, even after everything, still whispered in her ear, still stroked her hair, still promised her it would all be okay. Dad didn't speak on the drive home. He sat in silence, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. When we finally pulled into the driveway, he turned to me and said quietly, "Son, I don't know if this family will ever recover from what she's done, but I swear to you I will never let you be the scapegoat again." It was the first time I truly believed him. But it wasn't the end, because even after probation, after therapy, after years passed, Emma never let go of her resentment, and when she left for California, she didn't just leave behind her hometown, she left behind us all. The years after the trial were like living with a ghost that refused to leave. Emma wasn't physically gone yet, but her presence haunted everything. She served her probation, grudgingly attended therapy, and went through the motions of college, but it was clear her heart wasn't in anything except resenting me. She never apologized, not once. Not for trying to frame me, not for nearly ruining my future, not for tearing our family apart. If anything, she doubled down on her hatred. When she looked at me, her eyes burned with quiet fury, like I had been the one who betrayed her. It was surreal. She committed the crime, she told the lies, but in her mind I was the villain because I refused to take the fall. Mom never stopped coddling her. Even when Emma gave her the cold shoulder, even when she rolled her eyes and snapped at her, Mom defended her to the bitter end. She paid for most of Emma's fines, covered her legal fees, and even financed her college tuition as if nothing had happened. It was like she thought money could erase consequences, like buying her way out of shame was easier than admitting she'd raised a narcissist. Dad, on the other hand, hardened. He made Emma pay something, a small portion of the fine mandatory therapy sessions and zero special treatment under his roof. He even made her work part-time at one of his businesses during probation. She hated every second of it, of course. She saw it as humiliation, not accountability, but Dad didn't care anymore. The real fracture was between my parents. They stopped sleeping in the same bedroom. Mom moved into the guest room for space and never moved back. Their marriage became a formality, a business arrangement, nothing more. Dad threw himself into his companies while Mom sulked in her corner of the house, bitter and resentful. They were technically still married, but only on paper. As for me, I moved forward. My dad and I grew closer than ever. He respected me for standing firm, for refusing to be destroyed to protect Emma. He supported me through school, helped me launch into a stable career, and always reminded me that he was proud of me. For once in my life, I felt like I wasn't competing with my sister for his approval. I didn't have to, he'd seen the truth with his own eyes. Emma eventually graduated, but she barely made it to the ceremony. She was already planning her escape. California, she said, a fresh start, a new life, a chance to finally be free of us. She landed an office job in Los Angeles thanks entirely to Dad's connections and vanished. She didn't just distance herself, she ghosted us. No calls, no visits, no holidays, not even a text. Mom was crushed. For years, she wept during Christmas dinners, staring at Emma's empty seat like it was a grave. She ranted about how cruel Emma was for abandoning her, how unfair it was that her baby left without looking back. But she never admitted that her own blind favoritism had helped drive Emma into becoming who she was. She never connected the dots that maybe, just maybe, enabling lies and punishing the truth had consequences. After a while, Mom stopped crying. The grief curdled into bitterness. She didn't blame me anymore, not out loud, but she didn't forgive me either. We existed in a state of indifference. She was the woman who tried to sacrifice me for her golden child, and I was the son who would never let her forget it. Dad, though, he was done with Emma. He disowned her in everything but name. When people in town asked about her, he shrugged and said, "She's not part of this family anymore." He meant it. The man who had once given her every chance now didn't care if she ever called again. And the rest of the family, they turned on her too. Cousins, uncles, grandparents, everyone knew the story. Emma wasn't just selfish, she was toxic. When she left, they didn't chase after her, they let her go. Now, years later, Emma lives her life in Los Angeles. She works in an office, surrounded by people who have no idea who she really is. Maybe she tells them stories about her family, painting herself as the misunderstood victim. Maybe she hides the truth, pretending she left behind a small town that never appreciated her brilliance. I don't know, I don't care. What I do know is this: my family will never be the same. My parents are locked in a loveless marriage, my mom a shell of herself, my dad hardened by betrayal. Emma is gone, and the golden child's glow has burned out into silence. And me, I survived. I walked through fire and came out scarred but whole. I learned that truth doesn't always protect you, sometimes it nearly destroys you, but it's still the only thing worth holding onto. When I look back now, I realize Emma didn't just nearly ruin my future. She broke something far bigger, the illusion that family is unbreakable. Because family can break. Sometimes all it takes is one golden child who thinks the world owes her everything, and a parent willing to sacrifice anyone else to keep her shine alive.